The ancient map trembled in Dájį's weathered hands, its faded markings telling a story buried for generations. Dawn's light crept across the canyon walls as the Apache warrior studied the parchment given to him by the lost settler girl. For 30 summers he had walked these lands, but never had he imagined what secrets lay beneath the sacred ground. The elders spoke of treasures hidden from those who would destroy their people's legacy, artifacts that held power to heal the wounds between two worlds at war. As Silent Hawk traced the eagle's wing etched in stone, the earth seemed to whisper forgotten promises. What if this discovery wasn't meant to remain buried, but instead to bridge what had been broken? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Abigail Thornton clutched the leather tube to her chest as she stumbled through the unfamiliar terrain. The Arizona Territory of 1875 showed no mercy to a 12-year-old girl separated from her wagon train. 3 months had passed since fever took both her parents, leaving her in the reluctant care of an uncle who viewed her as nothing more than an unwanted burden. "Keep moving," she whispered to herself, her throat parched from hours without water. The sudden storm had come from nowhere. A wall of water rushing down the narrow canyon, overturning the wagon and sweeping away everything except the precious tube her father had pressed into her hands on his deathbed. "Guard this with your life, Abby," he had rasped, his eyes bright with fever. "It's more important than you know." The setting sun cast long shadows across the desert landscape as Abigail's legs threatened to give way beneath her. Her dress, once blue, now hung in dirty tatters around her ankles. Her blonde hair, escaped from its braids, whipped around her face in the evening breeze. When she could walk no further, she collapsed beneath a twisted juniper and opened the tube for the 100th time. The parchment inside was weathered and, strange, covered with markings she couldn't understand. She had studied it night after night by campfire light, trying to make sense of her father's final gift. "What were you trying to tell me, Papa?" she whispered, tracing the faded lines with her finger. As darkness fell completely, Abigail realized she had no choice but to continue or die alone in this wilderness. Rising on trembling legs, she spotted a narrow game trail winding between the rocks. With no better option, she followed it, the strange map clutched in her hand. The moon rose, casting an ethereal glow across the landscape. The trail led her deeper into territory she had been warned never to enter, Apache land. Fear mingled with exhaustion as she pressed forward, each step heavier than the last. The broken wagon wheel lay miles behind her now, its splintered remains, a testament to how quickly life could change course. Just yesterday, she had been traveling with her uncle's wagon train, isolated but safe. Now she was utterly alone. When Abigail crested a small rise, she gasped. Below her stretched a hidden canyon, invisible from the main trail. In the moonlight, she could make out the shapes of several wickiups and a small fire. The Apache camp was perfectly positioned, concealed from those who didn't know where to look. Her mind screamed at her to turn back, to run from the savages her uncle had described with such venom. But her body had reached its limit. Darkness crept in from the edges of her vision as she stumbled forward, no longer in control of her direction. The last thing Abigail remembered was the sound of alarmed voices as she collapsed at the edge of the camp, the unrolled map falling from her limp fingers and spreading open on the ground beside her, its strange markings catching the firelight, whispering secrets in a language older than memory. As consciousness fled, she thought she saw a tall figure approach, his face stern beneath a headband adorned with a single hawk feather. His dark eyes widened slightly as they moved from her face to the map beside her. Then darkness claimed her completely. Dájĩ knelt beside the unconscious girl, his obsidian knife resting lightly in his hand. The ceremonial blade had been with him for 20 summers, a symbol of his role as protector. Now it caught the firelight as he considered what the ancestors would have him do with this intruder into sacred land. At 45 winters, Dájĩ, Silent Hawk, had earned his place among the most respected warriors of the people. Once, he had sat in council with the elders, his voice carrying weight in tribal decisions, but that was before the fever took his wife and daughter 3 winters past. Since then, he had chosen the solitary life of a scout, finding peace in the canyons, where the spirits of his ancestors dwelled. "She is just a child," he murmured in his native tongue, studying her sunburned face. Behind him others gathered. Nantai, the eldest of their band, approached with careful steps. "What brings a white child to our hidden place?" the old man asked, his eyes moving to the parchment that had fallen from her hands. Dájĩ carefully unrolled the map, his breath catching as he recognized symbols that matched the stories his grandfather had told. Stories of a sacred cave where the people had hidden their most precious ceremonial items during the great conflict 2 generations past. "Grandfather," he said, using the respectful term for the elder, "this map shows the way to the ancient cache." The elder's eyes widened. How does a settler child possess such knowledge? More warriors gathered as Dájĩ explained what he recognized in the markings. The symbols of Eagle's Wing, Sacred Spring, and Medicine Mountain all match the oral history passed down through his family line. "We must bring this to the full council," said Nantai, his wrinkled face grave in the firelight. "The cache contains not only ceremonial items, but the peace documents that were never delivered, papers that could prove our rightful claim to the sacred waters." The warriors muttered among themselves, some casting suspicious glances at the unconscious girl. These were dangerous times. White settlers encroached further into their territories each season, bringing disease, whiskey, and violence. Trust had been broken too many times. "What of the girl?" asked Dájĩ, surprising himself with his concern. "Return her to her people," Nantai decided after a thoughtful silence. "But the map remains with us. It belongs to the people." Dájĩ nodded, though something troubled him about this plan. As he carefully rolled the parchment, his thoughts turned to his own daughter, who would have been near this girl's age. The key, memory of her laughter, still visited him in dreams. "I will take her to the trading post at sunrise," he said, sliding the map into his leather pouch, "and then I will bring this to council." That night, as others slept, Dájĩ sat beside the fire, studying the ancient markings. His grandfather had spoken of this cache, how it had been hidden when the blue-coated soldiers first came to their lands. Inside would be medicine bundles, ceremonial masks, and most importantly, the original treaty papers that had been signed but never honored. In the dancing flames, Dájĩ saw visions of the past, of broken promises and blood spilled on both sides. His hand moved to the obsidian knife at his waist, feeling its weight, its history. Dawn would bring difficult decisions, for now he would watch over this strange child who had unwittingly carried their people's legacy back to them. Abigail awoke with a start, sunlight streaming across her face. For a moment, confusion clouded her mind. This wasn't her uncle's wagon. The smell of pine smoke and unfamiliar cooking filled her nostrils. Memory rushed back as she bolted upright, heart pounding against her ribs. She was in an Apache camp. A woman near the cook fire glanced at her, then called out something in a language Abigail couldn't understand. Moments later, a tall man with a hawk feather in his headband approached. Instinctively, she reached for her silver locket, the only memento of her parents she had left, and clutched it for courage. "You safe," the man said in halting English. "No harm." Abigail swallowed hard. Her uncle's warnings about bloodthirsty savages echoed in her mind, but the man's eyes held no malice, only watchfulness and perhaps curiosity. "My name is Abigail," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She pointed to herself. "Abigail," the warrior nodded. "Dájĩ," he replied, touching his chest. Then he added, "Silent Hawk." "Thank you for helping me," she managed, though unsure. If he understood. Then she remembered. "My map! Where is my map?" Dájį tensed slightly, his expression hardening. He made a dismissive gesture, clearly unwilling to discuss it. Instead, he offered her a wooden bowl containing some kind of stew. Hunger overcame caution, and Abigail accepted it with trembling hands. As she ate, she studied the camp surreptitiously. Women worked at various tasks, children played, and men prepared weapons or tended horses. It was nothing like the chaotic, barbaric scene her uncle had described. It was simply people living their lives. Dájĩ watched her intently, occasionally speaking to a wizened elder who had joined them. Though she couldn't understand their words, she caught the tension. In their voices, something troubled them, something about her. When she finished eating, Abigail tried again. "My father gave me that map before he died. Please, it's important." Understanding flickered in Dájĩ's eyes at the word father. He touched his chest, then gestured outward and away, then closed his eyes. The universal gesture for death. Yes. Abigail nodded, tears welling unexpectedly. "My father is dead. Mother too." She touched the locket. "Fever." Dájĩ was silent for a long moment. Then, surprising her, he spoke more English than she'd expected. "My daughter, gone also." He held his hand at waist height. "Small, like you." The revelation hung in the air between them, a bridge across the divide of language and culture. Abigail felt an unexpected connection to this stern warrior whose eyes now held the same shadow of loss she carried within herself. The old man spoke urgently to Dájĩ, gesturing toward the edge of the camp. Other warriors were gathering, clearly discussing something important. Abigail caught the word map amid their conversation. "I take you back," Dájĩ said abruptly. "Tomorrow, white settlement." "But my map," she began. He cut her off with a gesture. "No map. Stay here." That night, as the camp settled into slumber, Abigail lay awake beneath borrowed blankets. She touched her locket, opening it to reveal the tiny daguerreotype of her parents. Their faces, frozen in time, offered no guidance for her present situation. Across the dying fire, she saw Dájĩ sitting sentinel, his silhouette outlined against the stars. Despite everything, she felt safer in his presence than she had since her parents' death. Her uncle had never shown her such consideration. Tomorrow would bring another journey, another unknown. But tonight, caught between two worlds, Abigail finally surrendered to exhaustion and slept. Dawn painted the canyon walls with amber light as Dájĩ and Abigail set out. The warrior had explained through gestures and his limited English that the nearest settlement was 3 days' journey. Away, he carried only essential supplies: a water skin, dried meat, a small bundle of herbs, and, hidden beneath his buckskin shirt, the ancient map. Abigail followed silently, her eyes constantly drawn to the man's straight back and purposeful stride. Though still upset about her map, she felt an inexplicable trust in him that defied her uncle's warnings about Apache devils. By midday, they had covered significant ground. Dájĩ motioned for her to sit in the shade of a towering rock formation while he checked their surroundings. When he returned, he showed her how to find water in a seemingly dry environment, digging beneath a sandy wash to reveal moisture. "Watch," he instructed, demonstrating how to create a small basin that slowly filled with drinkable water. Abigail tried herself, her face lighting with triumph when water began to seep into her small hole. "I did it!" she exclaimed, looking up for his approval. The faintest smile touched Dájĩ's lips before vanishing. He nodded once, then pointed to a desert plant. "Medicine," he said, breaking off a piece of the spiny leaf and squeezing its gel onto a small burn on his arm. "For hurt." Throughout that first day, these small lessons continued. He taught her Apache words for water, sun, and earth. She taught him English words he didn't know. The language barrier began to feel less insurmountable. That evening, they were forced to change course when Dájĩ discovered signs of a recent flash flood that had washed out their intended path. The detour would take them through rougher country, but he seemed unconcerned. As they made camp that night, Abigail gathered courage to ask again about her father's map. "Please," she said, making a drawing gesture with her hands. "It was my father's last gift to me." Dájį regarded her silently, conflict evident in his dark eyes. Finally, he spoke. "Map shows sacred place, Apache place." He touched his chest. "My grandfather hid things there, important to my people." "My father never told me what it was for," Abigail admitted. "He just said to keep it safe." "How your father find Apache map?" Dájĩ asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Abigail shook her head. "I don't know. He worked with the army sometimes, as a translator. He spoke many languages." This information seemed to trouble Dájĩ. He grew quiet, staring into the small fire he had built. After they had eaten, he took out a small knife and a piece of clay-like material. His hands moved deftly, shaping the substance. Abigail watched, fascinated, as a small figurine emerged. "A Dájĩ, little doll with a simple dress, for you," he said, offering the clay doll, "like I make for my daughter." Abigail accepted the gift, turning it carefully in her hands. The simple kindness brought tears to her eyes. "What was her name?" she asked. "Softly, Nasha," he replied, his voice barely audible above the crackling fire. "Means owl in your words." As stars wheeled overhead, Dájĩ taught her their Apache names, pointing out patterns different from those her father had shown her. Though they came from different worlds, the same stars watched over them both. Clutching the clay doll, Abigail fell asleep to the sound of Dájĩ's low humming, a melody strange yet comforting, bridging the vast distance between their separate lives. Copper Springs barely deserved the name settlement. A cluster of rough-hewn buildings huddled in the shadow of rust-colored cliffs, more an outpost than a town. The trading post stood. At its center, flanked by a saloon, livery stable, and a handful of ramshackle dwellings. As they approached, Dájĩ slowed his pace. "I stop here," he said, gesturing for Abigail to continue alone. "Not welcome." "But you brought me all this way," Abigail protested. "At least let me thank you properly." Reluctance shadowed his face, but he nodded once and continued forward, his posture changing subtly, shoulders squaring, chin lifting, ready for confrontation. The reaction was immediate. A man splitting wood outside the stable froze mid-swing, his axe suspended in air. A woman hurried her children indoors. Two miners lounging outside the saloon straightened, hands drifting to their belts. "Apache," one spat, the word itself like a curse. Dájĩ ignored them, guiding Abigail toward the trading post with a light hand on her shoulder. The wooden steps creaked beneath their feet as they entered the dim interior, dust motes dancing in the shafts of light that penetrated the grimy windows. Thomas Burke, the trader, looked up from his ledger, pen poised mid-entry. His weathered face tightened at the sight of Dájĩ. "Well now," he drawled, closing the book with deliberate slowness, "to what do we owe this unexpected visit?" "He rescued me," Abigail interjected before Dájĩ could respond. "I got separated from Uncle Ford's wagon train during the storm." Burke's gaze shifted to her, surprise evident. "You're the Thornton girl. Your uncle's been raising hell about you being missing." His eyes narrowed. "Said you had something valuable with you when you disappeared." Dájĩ tensed beside her, and Abigail felt a sudden urge to protect him. "I had nothing of value," she lied. "Just got lost, and this man found me and brought me safely here." The trader's expression suggested he didn't believe her, but he nodded slowly. "I'll send word to your uncle. He's been staying at the saloon, drowning his concerns." The pause made it clear what Burke thought of Ford Thornton's priorities. He disappeared into the back room, and Abigail turned to Dájĩ. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, before his stoic mask returned. "Be careful," he murmured, so low she barely caught the words. Before she could ask what he meant, the door banged open. Her Uncle Ford staggered in, stinking of cheap whiskey and sweat. His bloodshot eyes found her, then hardened as they shifted. Dájį, you, he growled. What have you done with my niece? Uncle Ford, Abigail began. He saved. Quiet, girl, he snapped. Where's the map? The one your father gave you? The abrupt question sent a chill through Abigail. How did he know about that? From the corner of her eye, she saw Burke return, standing too close to her uncle, a silent communication passing between them. I lost it, she said carefully. During the storm. Ford grabbed her arm roughly. Don't lie to me, girl. That map's worth more than you know. Dájĩ stepped forward, his hand falling to the knife at his belt. The tension in the room thickened. Perhaps, Burke interjected smoothly, this conversation would be better continued privately. The Apache has done his duty. He can go now. Dájĩ didn't move, his eyes fixed on Ford's painful grip on Abigail's arm. It's fine, Abigail said, though her voice betrayed her. Thank you for bringing me home. For a long moment, Dájĩ stood motionless. Then, with a barely perceptible nod, he backed toward the door, his eyes never leaving hers. As he disappeared into the harsh sunlight, Abigail felt something inside her sink. She was back among her own people, yet she had never felt more alone. Dájĩ rode hard through the night, the map secure against his chest. Though he had left Abigail behind as planned, unease followed him like a shadow. The girl's uncle had shown more interest in the map than in her welfare, a troubling sign that confirmed the wisdom of keeping the document with the people. The tribal camp had relocated in his absence, a standard precaution in these uncertain times. By mid-morning, he found them in a hidden valley several miles from their previous location. As he approached, children playing at the stream's edge spotted him first, calling out his arrival. Elder Nantai emerged from his wickiup, an eagle, feather clutched in his gnarled hand. You have returned safely, the old man observed. And the white child? Returned to her people, Dájĩ replied, dismounting. But something is wrong. Her uncle seeks the map with too much hunger in his eyes. Nantai nodded slowly. Come, the council awaits your report. The tribal leaders gathered in the central circle, 7 men and 3 women whose wisdom guided the band. Dájĩ knelt respectfully, producing the ancient map and placing it before them. I believe this truly leads to our ancestors' sacred cache, he began, recounting his journey with Abigail and the suspicious behavior of the trader and her uncle. The girl's father was a translator for the Blue Coats, he added. Somehow he acquired this map, but not to steal from us. He protected it, even in death. Nantai took up the eagle feather, a symbol of truth-speaking. Our oldest stories tell of a time when a great sickness swept through our people. 2 generations passed as the Blue-Coat soldiers first came to our lands. Our chief Red Hawk ordered our most sacred items hidden away. The elder's voice dropped lower, forcing all to lean forward. Among these items were not only ceremonial objects but documents, papers that the white man's government had signed, acknowledging our ancestral rights to the sacred waters and hunting grounds. Murmurs rippled through the council. Such papers, if they existed, could change everything in their dealings with the encroaching settlers. The cache location was known only to 3 men, Nantai continued. All have joined the ancestors. This map, he touched the parchment reverently, may be the only remaining path to our heritage. And to justice, added a woman elder named Kia, her face etched with the wisdom of 70 winters. Debate flowed through the council circle. Some argued for leaving the cache undisturbed, respecting the ancestors' decision to hide these treasures. Others insisted that the time had come to reclaim what was rightfully theirs, especially the treaty papers that might protect their dwindling territories. As the sun reached its zenith, a scout burst into camp with alarming news. A posse of white men, led by Burke and Thornton, was searching the canyons, asking about Apache camps and a missing map. The council fell silent. Then Nantai rose, the eagle feather extended toward Dájĩ. Silent Hawk, You alone among us have seen this map and walked with the white girl who brought it to us. The spirits have chosen you for this task. Take this sacred feather and follow the path of our ancestors. Find the cache before these men desecrate it with their greed." Dájĩ accepted the feather, feeling its weight beyond its physical presence. With it came responsibility to the past and future of his people. "I will need 3 days to prepare," he began. But Nantai shook his head. "There is no time. You must leave immediately." As Dájĩ gathered supplies, a troubling vision of Abigail's face haunted him, her eyes wide with fear as her uncle gripped her arm. The girl had suffered loss, as had he. She deserved better than a guardian who valued paper over her safety. With the eagle feather secured in his headband and the map carefully protected, Dájĩ made a decision that went beyond the council's instructions. Before seeking the sacred cache, he would return to Copper Springs. First, he would ensure the girl's safety. Copper Springs lay shrouded in darkness when Dájĩ returned. Only the saloon showed signs of life, yellow lamplight spilling onto the dusty street, raucous laughter punctuating the night. He tethered his horse in a stand of cottonwoods outside town and moved silently toward the settlement, invisible as a shadow. Years of scouting had taught him patience. He watched, waited, learned the rhythm of the place. The trading post stood, dark except for a single light in the back room. There, through a grimy window, he spotted Burke, hunched over his ledger, making entries by lamplight. A soft sound drew his attention to the storeroom at the building's side. A wooden shutter rattled slightly, as if someone inside were trying to loosen it. Dájĩ crept closer. "Hello?" a small voice whispered. "Is anyone there?" "Abigail," he replied softly. "Dájĩ!" The relief in her voice was palpable. "They've locked me in. Uncle Ford says I'm not leaving until I tell him everything about the map." Anger flashed through him. Even among enemies, children were to be protected, not treated as prisoners. "Stand back," he instructed. The rawhide rope at his belt made quick work of the shutter's simple latch. Moments later, Abigail squeezed through the narrow opening, falling into his arms. In the moonlight, he saw a darkening bruise on her cheek. "Did your uncle do this?" he asked, fingers hovering above the mark. She nodded, tears welling. "He said, Papa stole something valuable. He and Mr. Burke have been drinking and arguing about who gets what when they find the Apache treasure." She gripped his arm. "They're planning to leave at first light with some miners to search the canyons." "Come," Dájĩ said, leading her toward the horses. "Not safe here." As they reached the cottonwoods, angry shouts erupted from the trading post. Burke's voice carried clearly, "The girl's gone. Check the stables." They mounted swiftly, Abigail seated before him. As they rode into the night, the settlement dissolved into darkness behind them. Only when they were miles away, in the shelter of a box canyon, did Dájĩ finally halt. "Thank you," Abigail said, warming her hands by the small, smokeless fire he had built. "I was so afraid." Dájĩ studied her in the flickering light. For a white child, she showed remarkable courage. "Your uncle, not good man. He never wanted me," she said simply. "When my parents died, he only took me because the army officer insisted. He's been trying to get rid of me ever since." Dájĩ nodded, understanding the weight of unwanted obligations. Then, making a decision, he withdrew the map from his shirt. Abigail's eyes widened. "You had it all along," she whispered. "Yes." He spread it on the ground between them. "Your father. How he get this?" Abigail frowned in concentration. "He never said exactly, but once when he was very sick with fever, he talked about a promise to make things right. He said the map wasn't stolen, but given freely by an old Apache who was dying." This new information settled in Dájĩ's mind, aligning with pieces of tribal history he knew. "The map shows way to sacred place," he explained. "Hidden things from long ago. Papers that prove Apache rights to land and water. That's why Burke and Uncle Ford want it," Abigail realized. There's gold in these hills, if the Apache have legal rights. Dájĩ nodded, impressed by her quick understanding. They follow us tomorrow. We must move quickly. As he studied the map again, Abigail pointed to markings along its edge. Papa told me these symbols relate to the stars and moon phases. They're timing indicators, showing when certain landmarks appear. Dájĩ looked at her with newfound respect. You know more than you say, she shrugged. Papa taught me many things. He said knowledge is the one thing no one can take from you. In the silence that followed, Dájĩ made another decision. We go together, he said finally. Find sacred place before bad men come. Under the vast desert sky, an unlikely alliance was formed, bound by a weathered map, and the shared understanding that some treasures transcend the divisions of blood and history. First light found them moving steadily toward distant mountains that rose like sentinels against the horizon. According to the map, the initial landmark, a distinctive pinnacle resembling a hawk's beak, lay 2 days' journey to the northeast. Before setting out, Dájĩ had performed a brief ceremony, taking pinches of sacred tobacco from an intricately beaded pouch and offering them to the 4 directions. Abigail watched silently, recognizing the reverence of the moment without understanding its full meaning. For protection, he explained afterward, tucking the ceremonial tobacco pouch back into his shirt. Ask ancestors to guide us. As they rode, Dájĩ began teaching Abigail simple Apache phrases, words for danger, water, silence, that might prove vital in the days ahead. She proved a quick student, her ear for language, reminding him that her father had been a translator. How did your father learn languages? He asked during a brief rest at midday. He grew up at a mission school, Abigail explained, sipping sparingly from the water skin. There were children from many tribes there. He said understanding different words was like finding paths between worlds. Dájĩ considered this. And the map? How he find it? Abigail's brow furrowed in concentration. He said an old medicine man gave it to him. They met when Papa was translating for the army. The old man was dying and had no sons to pass it to. She looked up at Dájĩ. Papa said the man told him the map should find its way home when the time was right. This revelation settled into Dájĩ's thoughts as they continued their journey. Perhaps the ancestors had guided the map's path back to the people through this girl. Such things were not unknown in the old stories. By late afternoon they spotted dust clouds rising in the distance behind them, riders following their trail. Uncle Ford? Abigail asked, fear edging her voice. Dájĩ nodded grimly. And others, we take harder path now. He led them off the natural route into rockier terrain where their tracks would be more difficult to follow. The going was slower, but it offered better protection from pursuing eyes. As they navigated a narrow passage between towering stone walls, a band of wild horses appeared suddenly before them. Magnificent creatures led by a proud black stallion. Both travelers halted entranced by the unexpected sight. Mustangs, Dájĩ murmured respectfully. Free ones. The stallion regarded them imperiously before leading his band away, disappearing around a bend in the canyon like spirits returning. To another world. They're beautiful, Abigail whispered. No ropes, no fences. Like land should be, Dájĩ replied. No boundaries drawn by men who never walk it. That evening they camped in a sheltered alcove, their small fire well hidden. From distant eyes, Dájĩ used the last light to study the map again, tracing the path ahead with a weathered finger. Tomorrow we reach first marker, he said. From there we follow the 7 sisters, Abigail finished, pointing to a cluster of stars just becoming visible in the darkening sky. Papa called them the Pleiades. The map shows they align with the next landmark. Dájĩ looked at her with surprise. How you know this? She smiled shyly. I watched you studying the stars last night, and Papa taught me to read the sky. He said stars are the one language all people share. As night fully claimed the land, Dájĩ shared stories of how Coyote had scattered the stars across the sky, while Abigail told him the Greek myths her father had taught her about the same constellations. Different words, different tales, yet each describing the same distant lights. In the comfortable silence that followed, Dájĩ felt an unexpected sense of rightness in their unlikely partnership. The girl brought knowledge that complemented his own. Pieces of a puzzle the ancestors had perhaps intended to be solved together. Behind them, their pursuers camped for the night, their distant fire a reminder of the danger that would resume with dawn. But for now, beneath the vast canopy of stars, two people from different worlds found common ground in the language of the sky. The canyon entrance appeared deceptively simple, a narrow fissure in the red rock face that most travelers would pass without notice. Dájĩ dismounted, studying the formation carefully before nodding with satisfaction. "Here," he confirmed, tracing a weathered symbol on the map. "Ancient path begins." They secured their horses in a hidden grotto with water and shade, knowing the animals couldn't navigate the passage ahead. With provisions packed into simple hide pouches, they approached the canyon entrance on foot. "Stay close," Dájĩ instructed as they squeezed into the narrow opening. "Path changes, easy to become lost." Inside, the world transformed. Towering walls of striated stone rose hundreds of feet above them, creating a realm of perpetual twilight. The air felt cooler, carrying echoes of water dripping somewhere in the distance. Their path wound through the canyon's heart, sometimes so narrow they had to turn sideways to pass. After an hour of careful progress, the passage opened to a small chamber where sunlight filtered through a crack in the ceiling high above. On the far wall, barely visible in the diffused light, ancient paintings covered the stone, handprints, animal figures, and geometric designs in faded ochre and white. "The pictograph wall," Abigail whispered with reverence. Dájĩ nodded, approaching the wall slowly. His fingers hovered over but didn't touch the ancient markings. "My grandfather spoke of this place. Ancestors left messages, signs for those who would come later." Abigail studied the images, eyes widening as she recognized a pattern. "Look," she said, pointing to a spiral symbol. "It matches this marking." "On the map," Dájĩ compared them, a smile of confirmation crossing his weathered face. "We follow right path." As they continued deeper into the canyon, the passage grew more challenging. In places, they climbed over massive boulders or edged along narrow ledges. At one particularly difficult section, Dájĩ prepared to lift Abigail across a gap, but she surprised him by scrambling up the rock face with unexpected agility, finding handholds where he saw none. "My father taught me," she explained, noting his impressed expression. "He said a girl should know how to climb as well as any boy." Their progress was halted by a sudden sound, the unmistakable rumble of distant thunder. Dájĩ tensed, grabbing Abigail's arm. "Flash flood danger," he said urgently. "We must find higher ground." They scrambled upward, seeking shelter as the canyon darkened ominously. The storm struck with desert fury, brief but violent. Rain pounded the canyon walls, transforming dry washes into rushing torrents within minutes. From their refuge in an ancient cliff dwelling, they watched water surge through the passage they had just navigated. "We're safe here," Dájĩ assured her as Abigail shivered beside him. Old ones built well. As they waited out the storm, Abigail explored their shelter, a single room carved into the cliff face, its entrance nearly hidden by centuries of erosion. In the dust near one wall, something caught her eye. Pottery shards, their surfaces decorated with symbols similar to those on the map. "Dájĩ, look at this," she called, carefully gathering the fragments. "These markings, they're like the ones my father showed me." He examined the pieces, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Medicine signs, for healing ceremonies." He looked around the small space with new understanding. This was holy place. As darkness fell, they built a small fire from dry wood, stored in the dwelling's corner, left by previous visitors, perhaps years or even decades earlier. In its flickering light, Dájĩ shared the creation story of his people, how they had emerged into this world through a reed that connected the underworld to this one. "The canyon remembers when the people first walked here," he said softly. Stories in stone, never forget. That night, Abigail dreamed of her parents. In the dream, her father smiled and pointed to the map, then to Dájĩ. Trust him, he seemed to say. He walks the right path. She awoke at dawn to find Dájĩ already studying the map in the soft morning light. Something had changed. New markings, previously invisible, had appeared on the parchment. Sun magic, Dájĩ murmured. Map has secrets that only show themselves when time is right. Below, the floodwaters had receded, leaving the canyon floor transformed but passable. And somewhere behind them, their pursuers faced the same obstacles, delayed but not deterred. The hidden springs revealed themselves reluctantly, tucked into a sheltered valley where the canyon widened unexpectedly. Emerald reeds surrounded pools of startling clarity, their surface mirroring the sky above. Steam rose gently from one pool, evidence of the thermal waters beneath. We must reach springs before full moon, Dájĩ had told her as they emerged from the canyon. Now, with the destination before them, his normally stoic expression softened with reverence. Sacred waters, he explained quietly, given to the people when world was new. As they approached, Abigail stumbled suddenly, a sharp cry escaping her lips. A jagged rock had sliced through her worn boot, cutting her ankle deeply. Blood flowed freely as she sat heavily on the ground. Dájĩ knelt beside her, examining the wound with concern. Bad cut, needs medicine. He helped her to the springs, where he washed the injury carefully in the clear water. From a small pouch, he extracted a grey-green clay gathered from the spring's edge. Healing mud, he explained, applying it gently to the wound. Sacred, has power from deep earth. As he worked, Dájĩ sang softly, a melody that seemed to weave through the air like the steam from the thermal pools. Though Abigail couldn't understand the words, their purpose was clear: healing, protection, strength. By nightfall, fever seized her despite Dájĩ's ministrations. The infection had taken hold quickly, her small body burning with alarming heat. Dájĩ carried her to a small cave near the springs, creating a bed of soft grasses and covering her with his own blanket. Throughout the night, he tended her faithfully, applying fresh clay poultices, offering sips of medicinal tea, and continuing his healing songs as she drifted between consciousness and fevered dreams. In her delirium, Abigail saw impossible things. Her parents standing nearby watching with loving concern, and with them a beautiful Apache woman holding the hand of a small girl, both looking at Dájĩ with unmistakable love. "Your wife," Abigail murmured, surprising him. "And Nasha. They're here." Dájĩ's hands stilled in the act of preparing another poultice. "What you say? They're watching you," she continued, her eyes unfocused. "Your wife says the path you walk is good. She says to tell you that she waits in the place beyond stars, but you still have much to do here." His breath caught. He had never spoken his wife's Apache name to Abigail, yet the words the girl spoke carried unmistakable truth, phrases his wife had often used, sentiments only she would express in such a way. By dawn, the fever began to recede. Abigail slept peacefully now, her breathing steady and strong. Dájĩ sat beside her, his mind turning over what had happened in the night. He had witnessed many strange things in his years as a warrior and scout, but few as inexplicable as this child speaking his wife's thoughts. When Abigail finally woke, the sun was high overhead. She had no memory of her fevered words, but she recognized the changed way Dájĩ looked at her, with a mixture of wonder and newfound respect. "The cut, it's better," she said, examining her ankle where the wound had already begun to close cleanly. "Sacred clay heals," he replied simply, "and your spirit is strong." During her recovery over the next day, their unusual education continued. Dájĩ taught her more complex Apache phrases, while she helped him expand his English vocabulary. They created a simple sign language between them for situations when silence was necessary. On the evening before they planned to depart, Dájĩ shared the spring's origin story, how the Creator had struck the earth with lightning, bringing forth healing waters as a gift to the people during a time of great suffering. "My grandfather brought me here as boy," he said, watching the sunset paint the pools in gold and crimson. "Said waters remember all who come, remember all stories." As Abigail tested her healing ankle, Dájĩ studied the map again, his expression growing concerned. "Signs show others coming," he said, pointing to fresh tracks they'd spotted earlier. "Your uncle and trader split up. Some follow canyon, others go around, try to reach next place first." Abigail nodded, understanding the urgency. "We should travel by night then. The stars will guide us, just like on the map." Dájĩ looked at her with approval that had grown into something deeper, a partnership of equals despite their differences in age and culture. "Yes," he agreed. "We follow star path now." The mesa stretched before them like a giant's table, flat, exposed, and offering no place to hide. In the pre-dawn light, Dájĩ studied the terrain with concern. They had recovered their horses from the canyon's edge, but crossing the open expanse would leave them vulnerable to anyone watching from the surrounding ridges. "Dangerous," he said simply. "No cover." Abigail nodded, understanding the risk. Her ankle had healed remarkably well thanks to the sacred clay, but a sense of urgency drove them forward. According to the map, they needed to reach the eagle's wing formation before the moon reached its fullest phase, just 2 days away. "We have no choice," she replied. "We'll have to be quick." They began their crossing as the first rays of sun touched the eastern horizon, riding at a steady pace. By mid-morning, heat waves danced across the mesa's surface, distorting distant views. Dájĩ kept them moving, his eyes constantly scanning for dust clouds or reflecting light that might betray pursuers. Near noon, an unexpected sight broke. The monotony, the weathered remains of a small homestead, its log walls partially collapsed from years of abandonment. "We rest horses," Dájĩ decided, guiding them toward the structure. "Too hot to continue now." Inside the ruined cabin, evidence of its former occupants remained. A broken chair, shards of pottery, a cast-iron stove now rusted and useless. While Dájĩ secured the horses in what remained of a lean-to, Abigail explored the single room. In a corner, beneath fallen roof beams, she discovered something surprising. A small, leather-bound book, its pages yellowed but still intact. She carefully brushed away the dust and opened it. "Dájĩ," she called softly, "look at this." The journal belonged to Hannah Wilson, who had settled there with her husband and 2 children in 1868. The entries told a story far different from what Abigail had been taught about frontier life. Hannah wrote of trading with local Apache bands, learning their medicinal plants, and establishing a tentative friendship with a medicine woman who had helped deliver her second child. The final entries described increasing tensions as new settlers arrived, bringing their fear and prejudice against the native people. The last page, dated 1871, expressed fear not of Apache attacks, but of vigilante settlers who had threatened her family for their Indian-loving ways. "They wanted peace," Abigail said, looking up at Dájĩ. "Just like my father did." Dájĩ examined the journal thoughtfully. "Some white people try to understand, most do not. Do you think we can ever live together without fighting?" she asked. Before he could answer, the distant sound of a horse's neigh froze them both. Through a gap in the wall, Dájĩ spotted a lone rider on the mesa's edge, scanning the terrain. "Scout," he whispered, "from your uncle's group." They retreated to the abandoned root cellar beneath the cabin floor, pulling the trapdoor closed above them. In the cramped darkness, they listened as hoofbeats approached, circled the homestead, then entered what remained of the structure above. Boots scraped across the floorboards directly overhead. Items were moved, investigated. A voice called out, then fell silent. Minutes stretched like hours as they remained motionless in the musty darkness. When the rider finally departed, they waited longer still before daring to emerge. In their haste to hide, they had left the journal visible. It was now gone, taken by the scout. "He knows we were here," Abigail whispered. As they prepared to leave, Dájĩ discovered something in the dirt of the root cellar. A small antelope horn whistle, its surface carved with intricate designs. He recognized it immediately as Apache craftsmanship. "Medicine woman's whistle," he explained, showing Abigail the traditional instrument. "For calling spirits, for summoning help." He tucked it carefully into his pouch. Another unexpected gift. From their journey, they left the homestead as evening approached, using the lengthening shadows for cover. Rather than continuing across the exposed mesa as their pursuers might expect, Dájĩ led them along its edge, a more difficult route that offered better concealment. That night, beneath a sky ablaze with stars, they spoke of what they had learned at the abandoned homestead, of people from different worlds who had tried to build understanding instead of walls. "My father believed it was possible," Abigail said softly. "That's why the map was important to him." Dájĩ was silent for a long moment before responding. "Perhaps the ancestors guide us toward what should be, not just what was." Above them, a meteor streaked across the sky, a sign that seemed to affirm their unlikely partnership and the path they followed together. They reached the rendezvous point near sunset, a distinctive rock formation where three boulders balanced improbably, atop one another. Here, according to arrangements made before Dájĩ had left his people, his cousin Keme would be waiting with fresh supplies for the final leg of their journey. "We rest here," Dájĩ told Abigail. "Keme knows these mountains well. We'll help us find faster path to Eagle's Wing." As darkness fell, a low whistle from the ridge announced the arrival of a solitary rider. Dájĩ responded with a similar call, and soon his cousin appeared, leading a pack-horse laden with supplies. Keme was younger than Dájĩ, perhaps 30 winters, with sharp features and a perpetual wariness in his eyes. He greeted his older cousin with restrained formality, his gaze lingering suspiciously on Abigail. "The elders did not say the white child would still be with you," he remarked in Apache. "She helps with the map," Dájĩ replied simply. "Her father was a good man. She has proven herself trustworthy." Keme's expression revealed his disagreement, but he said nothing more as they made camp and shared a simple meal of dried meat and corn cakes. While they ate, Dájĩ explained their progress and the signs that Ford Thornton's group was closing in on them. "Burke, the trader, leads another group," Dájĩ added. "They try to reach Eagle's Wing by northern path. And many whites seek what belongs to the people," Keme responded bitterly, "always taking, never satisfied." Abigail, though unable to understand their words, sensed the tension. She kept her distance, tending to the horses while the men talked. After the meal, Dájĩ left to hunt, hoping to bring down a rabbit for morning provisions. "Watch over her," he instructed Keme before disappearing into the darkness. Alone in camp, Keme's demeanor changed. He approached Abigail with forced friendliness, speaking broken English. "You help find Apache treasure?" he asked. "Not treasure," she corrected carefully. "Sacred things, important papers." Keme nodded, his interest clearly piqued. "Map show where?" Something in his tone made Abigail uneasy. "Dájĩ has the map," she said, deliberately vague. Undeterred, Keme continued his questions while stoking the small fire. When he offered her water from his skin, fatigue overcame caution, and she accepted, taking several deep swallows before. Settling near the fire's warmth, sleep came unexpectedly quickly. Through half-closed eyes, she watched as Keme moved to Dájĩ's pack, searching until he found the carefully folded map. He spread it open, studying it intently in the firelight. Abigail tried to rise, to call out, but her limbs felt impossibly heavy. The water, she realized too late, had been doctored with something to make her drowsy. Fighting against the encroaching darkness, she watched helplessly as Keme took out a knife and carefully cut away a corner of the map, the section showing the final approach to the Eagle's Wing formation. He tucked the stolen fragment inside his shirt, then began refolding the map. A small sound escaped Abigail's throat. Keme's head snapped up, eyes narrowing when he realized she was still conscious and had witnessed his betrayal. In 2 strides, he reached her. "You see nothing," he hissed, gripping her arm painfully. "Why?" she managed to ask, the words slurring from her numb lips. "The whites offer much for this," he answered, patting his shirt where the map fragment lay hidden. "More than my cousin who has everything, respect, honor, the elder's favor." A twig snapped nearby, Dájĩ returning. Kemme released her roughly and quickly replaced the map in the pack, moving away just as his cousin emerged from the darkness, a freshly killed rabbit in hand. Dájĩ sensed something amiss immediately. His eyes moved from Kemme's too casual stance to Abigail's unfocused gaze. "What happened?" he demanded. "The girl is tired," Kemme said with feigned innocence. "I gave her water." Dájĩ knelt beside Abigail, recognizing the signs of datura, a plant sometimes used in small doses for ceremonies, but dangerous in larger amounts. "What did you do?" he asked sharply, turning to confront his cousin, but Kemme was already moving, mounting his horse with practiced speed. "The white men pay well for information," he called back. "Better than the honor of a people who are already dying." Before Dájĩ could reach him, Kemme spurred his horse and disappeared into the night, taking with him the crucial fragment of their map and their hopes of reaching the sacred cache before their pursuers. By morning, the effects of the datura had worn off, leaving Abigail with a pounding headache but a clear memory of Kemme's betrayal. Dájĩ studied the mutilated map with grim focus, his face revealing little of the turmoil he surely felt at his kinsman's treachery. "Can we still find the way?" Abigail asked, her voice hoarse from the night's ordeal. Dájĩ looked up, his expression softening slightly at her concern. "The main path, yes, but final approach." He gestured to the missing corner. That part gone, they faced a devastating choice: abandon their quest or attempt a far more dangerous route through the mountains, one not marked on the map, but known to Dájĩ from his years of scouting. "Kemme rides to your uncle," he explained. "They will take easy path now. We must take hard way." The hard way proved to be a brutal understatement. They ascended narrow game trails that twisted up the mountainside, so steep in places that the horses struggled for footing. The air grew thinner, colder, as they climbed higher than Abigail had ever been. By midday, they had entered a realm of stone and sky, where stunted pines clung tenaciously to rock faces and clouds drifted at eye level. The vastness both awed and terrified Abigail, whose world had previously been limited to settlements and wagon trails. "How much farther?" she asked during a brief rest, trying to mask her exhaustion. Dájĩ pointed to a distant ridge, barely visible through swirling mist. "Eagle's wing there, 2 days if weather holds." As they navigated a particularly treacherous section, Dájĩ's horse suddenly balked, pawing nervously at something half buried in the trail. Dismounting, he knelt to investigate and unearthed an ancient stone axe, its edge still sharp despite years of exposure. "Grandfather's mark," he murmured, turning the tool to reveal a small symbol etched into its surface. "Your grandfather's?" Abigail asked, confused. "Grandfather clan," he clarified. "Very old, from time when people first walked these mountains." He secured the axe to his belt, another sign that their journey followed a path laid by ancestors long ago. The weather shifted abruptly as afternoon faded. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, bringing with them a biting wind that carried the unmistakable scent of snow. Though early in the season, mountain storms could be deadly, and Dájĩ quickened their pace, seeking shelter before nightfall. They found none. Darkness caught them on an exposed stretch of mountainside as the first snowflakes began to fall. With no alternative, Dájĩ used the ancient stone axe to hack branches from struggling pines, constructing a crude lean-to against a rock face. As night deepened, so did the storm. Wind howled around their meager shelter, driving snow through every gap. They huddled together for warmth, the horses providing some protection from the worst of the gale. "We should have stayed below," Abigail said through chattering teeth, guilt in her voice. "This is my fault." "No," Dájĩ replied firmly. "Kemme's choice, not yours." The temperature continued to plummet. Despite their shared blankets and the small fire they struggled to maintain, cold seeped into their bones. Dájĩ recognized the danger. In such conditions, sleep could mean death. "Tell me about your daughter," Abigail asked suddenly, fighting to stay awake. "About Nasha." The unexpected request caught him off guard, but he began speaking, his low voice barely audible above the wind. He told of Nasha's birth during a summer thunderstorm, of her first steps, of her laughter that reminded him of running water. With each memory shared, something long frozen within him began to thaw. Near dawn, the storm's fury finally abated, leaving a transformed world of pristine white. They emerged stiff and exhausted, but alive, a victory against the mountain's challenge. Their relief was short-lived. As they prepared to continue, Abigail ventured onto what appeared to be solid ground. The snow-covered ice beneath her feet gave way with a sickening crack, plunging her into frigid water. Dájĩ's reaction was instantaneous. Dropping to his stomach to distribute his weight, he extended his arm just as Abigail surfaced, gasping and thrashing. Their fingers met, locked, and with a strength born of desperation, he pulled her from the water's deadly embrace. Hypothermia became their new enemy. Working quickly, Dájĩ stripped away her sodden clothes, wrapped her in dry blankets, and rebuilt their fire to blazing intensity. As he held her shivering body close to his own warmth, he murmured prayers to ancestors who had survived these. "Mountains for generations, don't sleep," he commanded whenever her eyelids drooped. "Stay with me, Abigail." Through that endless day, they fought death together. By sunset, her shivering had subsided, her breathing steadied. They had survived the mountain's second challenge. The eagle's wing formation revealed itself through clearing mist, a massive outcropping of stone that extended from the mountainside like the outstretched wing of a great bird in flight. After 2 days of grueling travel, following Abigail's brush with death, they had finally reached the penultimate landmark on their journey. There, Dájĩ pointed, where map would show final path. Without Keme's stolen fragment, they faced uncertainty about the cache's exact location. They made camp beneath the formation, using the last hours of daylight to study the area. As Dájĩ secured the horses, Abigail noticed something unusual about the stones at the base of the wing. They were arranged in a pattern too regular to be natural. "Dájĩ," she called, "look at this." He joined her, examining the circular arrangement of flat stones. Some were positioned upright, others laid horizontally, creating an intricate pattern. Dájĩ walked slowly around the formation, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Stone calendar," he explained, "marks seasons, sun path, star positions. Similar to structures his grandfather had shown him as a child, this ancient astronomical marker might hold the key they needed. If they couldn't follow the map's final directions, perhaps they could read the signs left by the ancestors themselves." Dájĩ studied the stone arrangement carefully. "Calendar shows when to look," he said finally. "Tomorrow night, when moon rises, shadows will point the way." With a full day to wait, they established an observation post on a ridge overlooking the valley below. From this vantage point, they could monitor any approach while remaining hidden. By mid-afternoon, Dájĩ's vigilance was rewarded. Dust clouds rose from the valley floor, indicating riders approaching. Through Dájĩ's keen eyes, they identified 2 separate groups converging on the eagle's wing. One, led by Burke and accompanied by Keme, approached from the east. The other, smaller party, led by Ford Thornton, came from the south. 6, maybe 7 men, Dájĩ counted. Heavy weapons. "Will they find us?" Abigail asked, fear edging. Her voice, "Not if we stay hidden. Night will come, then stars show us way." As they waited, Dájĩ taught Abigail advanced tracking techniques, how to move without leaving signs, how to use terrain to mask sounds, how to become part of the landscape rather than an intruder upon it. "My father would have loved learning. And this," she remarked as evening approached, "he always said understanding other ways of seeing the world made a person wiser." "Your father?" Dájį said thoughtfully. Why did he want map returned to Apache? Abigail considered the question. He believed in justice, she answered finally. He told me once that most conflicts between people come from broken promises and forgotten agreements. He said the past needs to be made right before the future can be built. Her words hung in the night air as darkness fell completely. Below, their pursuers had established camps at the base of the eagle's wing, their fires visible as pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. They wait for same thing we wait for, Dájĩ observed, but they do not know how to read the stones. As the moon rose, full and luminous, they returned to the stone calendar. Just as Dájĩ had predicted, the moonlight cast shadows from the standing stones across the flat central stone. As the earth turned and the moon climbed higher, the shadows moved like the hands of a clock, gradually aligning to point toward a narrow canyon previously hidden in the mountain's folds. There, Dájĩ whispered, entrance to sacred place, with their pursuers camped directly between them and their destination. Reaching the canyon would require perfect timing and absolute stealth. They would need to circle wide around the camps, using the night and their knowledge to advantage. We go now, Dájĩ decided, while they sleep, while shadows show the way. Gathering only essential supplies, they began their careful descent. Each step required complete concentration. A dislodged stone or snapped twig could alert their pursuers. Abigail followed Dájĩ's movements exactly, placing her feet precisely where he had stepped, becoming his shadow. As they passed within 50 yards of Ford's camp, her uncle's voice carried clearly through the night. At first light, we searched that canyon. The Apache cache must be there. Abigail's heart raced. They had mere hours to reach the sacred place before their pursuers would follow. The race against dawn had begun. The hidden canyon narrowed as they progressed, its walls rising ever higher until only a slim ribbon of star-filled sky remained visible above. The sound of rushing water grew louder until they rounded a final bend and confronted a sight of unexpected beauty, a slender waterfall cascading from the cliff face, feeding a clear pool below. Water protects sacred place, Dájĩ explained, his voice hushed with reverence. Must pass through to enter. Abigail peered dubiously at the curtain of water. Pass through? Is there a cave behind it? Dájĩ nodded. Old stories say so. Few living have seen it. Dawn was approaching, the eastern sky already lightening behind the mountains. They had little time before their pursuers would begin searching the canyon. With silent resolve, Dájĩ stepped into the pool, wading toward the waterfall. Abigail followed, gasping as the cold water rose to her waist. Behind the silver curtain of falling water, just as the stories promised, a dark opening yawned in the rock face. Ancient steps, worn smooth by generations of feet, descended into darkness. Dájĩ produced a small torch of resinous wood from his pack and struck sparks to light it. Stay close, he cautioned as they began their descent. Sacred place has many chambers. The stairs continued downward, carved directly into living rock until they opened into a vast chamber. As the torchlight pushed back the darkness, Abigail's breath caught in her throat. The walls were covered with paintings, elaborate scenes depicting hunts, ceremonies, and what appeared to be first contact between Apache people and European settlers. The story of the people, Dájĩ murmured, running his fingers reverently, near but never touching the ancient pigments, from beginning to now. They followed the pictorial history deeper into the cave system, the images telling a complex narrative of cooperation and conflict, drought and abundance, war and peace. Finally, they reached a central chamber, its ceiling rising into darkness, beyond their torches' reach. Here, on stone platforms arranged in a circle, rested the sacred objects they had journeyed so far to find. Medicine bundles wrapped in deerskin, their contents undisturbed for generations, ceremonial masks carved from wood and adorned with feathers, shells, and paint. Most numerous were sealed clay vessels, dozens of them, their surfaces decorated. With intricate designs, water from sacred spring, Dájĩ explained, carefully examining one without disturbing it. Sealed when pure, keeps healing power for many years. As they moved around the chamber, Abigail noticed a small alcove set into the far wall. Unlike the rest of the cave, this section appeared more recently constructed, with flat stones forming. A crude shelf. On it sat a metal box, incongruous among the indigenous artifacts. "Dájĩ, look at this," she called. He approached slowly, recognition and wonder crossing his weathered features. "The papers," he whispered. "Treaty papers." With reverent care, he opened the box. Inside lay several documents, the paper yellowed, but preserved in the cave's constant temperature and humidity. The top document bore official seals and signatures, its heading still clearly legible. Treaty of Peace and Land Rights between the United States government and the Apache Nation. "This is what my father meant," Abigail breathed, understanding dawning. "The agreement that was never honored." Dájĩ nodded slowly as he examined the treaty. "Signed by chiefs, signed by government men. Says here," he pointed to a carefully drawn map on the document, "this land, these waters belong to the people, by white man's own law. And the mining rights would belong to the Apache," Abigail added, seeing now why Burke and her uncle had been so desperate to find the map. That's why they wanted to find it first, to destroy it. As they carefully examined the documents, Abigail felt a strange sensation, as if they were not alone in the chamber. Looking up, she gasped softly. In the flickering torchlight, she thought she saw the ghostly figure of her father standing nearby, smiling with approval. "Papa," she whispered. The vision, if it was one, nodded once before fading into the shadows. Whether real or imagined, the message seemed clear. They had completed what her father had begun, returning the truth to those who needed it most. Dájĩ performed a brief blessing ceremony, acknowledging the ancestors who had protected these treasures and the sacred space that had housed them. As he finished, a distant sound reached them, voices echoing from the canyon outside. Their pursuers had arrived. "We must decide quickly," Dájĩ said, gathering the treaty documents. "Take what proves our rights. Leave rest for another time." But as they prepared to depart, the voices grew louder, closer. The entrance was no longer an option for escape. Footsteps echoed down the stone stairway as Dájĩ quickly secured the treaty documents inside his shirt. He motioned Abigail behind a large stone altar, his finger to his lips. There was nowhere to run. The cave had only one entrance. The torch guttered as voices grew louder. Uncle Ford's unmistakable rasp echoed off the stone walls, followed by Burke's smoother tones and the shuffling of multiple feet. Within moments, the chamber filled with lamplight as the pursuers arrived. "Well now," Burke drawled, holding his lantern high. "Isn't this something?" Dájĩ stepped forward, positioning himself between the newcomers and Abigail. Behind Burke stood Ford Thornton, three rough-looking miners with rifles, and Keme, his expression a mixture of defiance and shame. "This place is sacred to the people," Dájĩ said firmly. "You do not belong here." Burke laughed, the sound harsh in the reverent space. "Seems to me possession is what matters out here in the territories, and right now we possess the only way out." Ford pushed forward, his bloodshot eyes scanning the chamber until they landed on Abigail. "There you are, you ungrateful brat. Where's the map your father stole?" "My father didn't steal anything," Abigail replied, stepping out from hiding. "And neither did we. These things belong to the Apache." Burke set his lantern down and moved toward the ceremonial objects. "These trinkets, they might fetch something from collectors back east, but that's not what we're here for." His gaze hardened. "Where are the papers?" Dájĩ remained motionless, his hand casually resting near the knife at his belt. "What papers?" "Don't play dumb, Injun," Ford snarled. "The treaty, that's what this has all been about." "The government has a contract with my company," Burke explained with false patience. "Very generous terms for mining rights throughout this region. Terms that would become worthless if certain historical documents were to surface." Understanding dawned on Abigail. You knew about the treaty all along. That's why you've been searching for the cache. Burke shrugged. Your father was getting too close to finding it, started asking questions about old Apache treaties, poking around government archives. Had to be stopped. You killed him? Abigail gasped. Fever killed him, Burke replied smoothly. We just ensured he didn't receive proper medical attention when it struck. Rage flashed across Abigail's face. You murdered him. Business, Burke corrected coldly. Now, the papers. Hand them over, and you both can leave this cave alive. Dájį remained impassive, but Abigail saw his eyes flick momentarily to Kem, who stood uncomfortably at the edge of the group. I'm staying with Dájĩ, Abigail declared, moving to stand beside the warrior. And I'll never go with you, Uncle Ford, not after what you've done. Her uncle lunged forward, grabbing her arm roughly. You'll do as you're told, girl. The movement provoked Dájĩ into action. In one fluid motion he drew his knife and stepped between them, forcing Ford to release his grip. The child chooses her own path, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Burke signaled to his men, who raised their rifles. Enough games. The papers. Now. Tension crackled in the ancient chamber as centuries of conflict between two peoples distilled into this moment. Dájĩ stood his ground, knowing that even if he surrendered the documents, these men would likely kill them both to eliminate witnesses. With subtle movements, he reached into his pouch and withdrew the antelope horn whistle discovered in the abandoned homestead. Abigail's eyes widened in recognition as he raised it to his lips. The sound that emerged echoed strangely in the chamber, high, haunting notes that seemed to penetrate stone itself. Burke's men shifted nervously as the eerie call continued. What the hell is that supposed to? Ford began, but his words died as new sounds reached them from the entrance passage. Footsteps, many of them. Into the chamber filed 6 Apache warriors, bows drawn, expressions grim. They had been tracking Dájĩ from a distance, honoring his journey while ensuring his safety, a precaution taken by the elders without his knowledge. Burke's hand moved toward his holstered pistol. You're still outnumbered, he bluffed. The standoff stretched for a heartbeat before chaos erupted. Burke fired the first shot, the bullet striking an ancient support column. Stone groaned ominously as dust rained from above. The cave is collapsing, someone shouted, as a larger chunk of ceiling crashed down near the ceremonial objects. In the confusion, Ford grabbed for Abigail again, but Keme, in a moment of redemption, pulled him away. Enough death, he shouted above the rumbling stone. 3 weeks later, Dájĩ stood on a ridge overlooking a remarkable gathering in the valley below. Tribal elders sat in a circle with territorial officials, army officers, and settlement representatives, an unprecedented meeting born from near tragedy. The cave's collapse had forced enemies to cooperate, digging frantically to free those trapped inside. In those desperate hours, barriers had temporarily fallen as Apache warriors worked alongside miners to move fallen stone. Most of the sacred items had been buried, but Dájĩ had made a crucial choice in those chaotic moments, saving lives, including Burke's, rather than attempting to retrieve more ceremonial objects. The treaty documents, however, had remained secure against his chest throughout the ordeal. Abigail joined him on the ridge, her face more freckled from weeks under. The desert sun. They're ready for you, she said, her voice carrying newfound confidence. Together they descended to the gathering. At the center sat the territorial governor, brought from Santa Fe to address the situation personally after the treaty documents had caused a political earthquake. Burke sat off to one side, under military guard, his mining schemes exposed. Of Ford Thornton there was no sign. He had fled the territory upon their escape from the cave. We have authenticated the treaty, announced Colonel James Harrison, the Army representative. Its provisions are legally binding, signed by federal authorities with proper jurisdiction. A murmur ran through the gathering. The implications were profound. Apache rights to sacred waters and specific territories would have to be honored, mining contracts renegotiated, boundaries redrawn. "This changes nothing," protested one settlement leader. "We've built homes, businesses. It changes everything," the governor interrupted firmly, "but need not result in further conflict." He turned to Nantai, the eldest of the Apache leaders. "I propose a compromise. Recognition of the sacred lands and waters as specified, with shared access to other resources under mutually beneficial terms." What followed was unlike anything the territory had witnessed. Genuine negotiation between peoples who had viewed each other only through the lens of conflict for generations. As discussions continued, Colonel Harrison approached Dájĩ with an unexpected proposal. "We need someone who understands both worlds," he explained, producing a silver badge. "The position of Indian agent has been problematic in the past, filled by men who saw only opportunity for personal gain." He extended the badge to Dájĩ. "You've demonstrated integrity that transcends tribal loyalty. Would you consider serving as the first Apache to hold this office?" Dájĩ studied the silver badge, a symbol of the very government that had broken promises to his people for generations. Yet in it, he saw possibility. "I will consider," he said carefully. Later, as the gathering dispersed with preliminary agreements in place, Abigail approached Dájĩ with hesitation in her steps. "The army officer says I should return to my mother's sister in St. Louis," she explained. Now that they know what Uncle Ford did." Dájĩ nodded, an unexpected heaviness settling in his chest at the thought of her departure. This child of another world had somehow become important to him, a connection he hadn't sought but now valued deeply. "Good family there?" he asked. "I barely know them," she admitted. "They're strangers to me." That evening, as representatives from both communities shared an unprecedented meal together, Dájĩ made his decision. With Nantai's blessing, he approached Abigail as she sat alone, watching the gathering. "Among the people," he said, kneeling beside her, "when a child loses family, they are not sent to strangers. They become part of a new family." Abigail's eyes widened with understanding. "If you wish," he continued, "you could stay. Learn the ways of the people, and teach us things from your world." "Like a daughter," she whispered. "Like family," he corrected gently. "Your own path, but not walked alone." The tribal ceremony took place at dawn the following day, simple yet profound. Abigail received a traditional blessing and a new name, Nashota, meaning twin spirit, acknowledging her existence between two worlds. As the sun climbed higher, Dájĩ stood with his newly formed family, the silver badge pinned to his shirt. Below them stretched the valley, where both Apache camps and settler cabins were visible, separate yet sharing the same landscape. "What happens now?" Abigail asked, the journal her father had begun clutched in her hands. She had decided to continue. His work, recording this new chapter of cooperation between peoples, Dájĩ considered the question, his gaze taking in the vast territory that had witnessed so much bloodshed and might now see something different. "Now," he said simply, "we make new stories.